So this is going to be quite a complicated one, and
Mhm.
it might take us a while, and I might have to, go a little bit faster and leave some of the rocks for you to finish up later if we don't get all the detail done. There's big areas like the house and the lighthouse, it's just like very basic filling in the color. Now we're going to start with the sky, and that's going to be quite difficult. I found it quite difficult because the photo didn't have any clouds in the sky. It was just sort of it was very, very gray, so sort of no color. And that's fine, but you don't really get the white of the lighthouse standing out if you have the sky that kind of pale gray. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper so that the white of the lighthouse stood out. So there's some choices. The cerulean, which is a lovely choice for the sky. There's cobalt, which is also a lovely choice. And there's phthalo blue. Now, if you use phthalo blue, you need to dilute it so it's not, you don't want, I'll get it full strength. Grab some full strength phthalo. So full strength phthalo looks like this, and you definitely don't want a sky that's full length, full strength. What I often do is mix the phthalo blue with the cerulean blue so that I have a combination of the two, and grab lots of water. So that would look like this. So it's sort of bright like the phthalo, but a little bit muted down with the cobalt. Now, a problem with the cerulean, which is a lovely blue for sky, is it can granulate. So if your cerulean particularly granulates, you might get a very grainy sky. Cobalt, not so much, but it does granulate a tiny bit. So kind of giving you all these warnings so you can be prepared for the sky to be a little bit tricky. We should do the sky on wet paper, because if you do it on dry paper and you're trying to get a big wash on, what's going to happen is you're going to get all these like dry edges everywhere, which will become streaks. See, I just put that on dry paper, and now if I try to go back, I'm going to get, so we need to work on wet paper for the sky. We need to have our color mixed up first so we're not waiting around and getting dry patches. And you need a biggish brush. I like a round brush. I tried a square brush for putting the sky on, and I just got streaks, square streaks from the square brush. My number 10 round was the best brush for doing that. So I sort of advise that you use your biggest, softest brush and decide on which sky color you would like. And when we're wetting the sky, what we have to be very, very careful is you want to get a lovely straight line down the edges of the lighthouse, because you don't want that sky going over into the white. If it does go over, then leave it to dry, and then we'll wash it out after the paint is dry and maybe even put a little bit of white on it. So let's get started with this, working on the sky. And I'm going to just keep it there for the moment. So with my big number 10 brush and really clean water, I'm going to start going down the edge of the lighthouse. I will zoom in a little bit. It's hard with this big painting to zoom in because you can't see all of it. But what I'm doing is I'm sort of holding my brush parallel to the paper on its side, and I'm stroking it downwards, letting the tip of the brush form that straight line down the side of the lighthouse. That's easier than trying to hold the brush up or trying to do it from a different angle. Same thing, you need to be careful along the top of the roof. All the other areas not so critical. You can put some water on bravely on some of the other areas, and of course at the top of the lighthouse you need to get a nice edge, because the red is not going to look good if you put it over blue. It will form a gray color, purplish gray. Now, normally, if I was coming to do this side, I would turn my painting around, but that's really complicated when I've got the camera and the light and everything here. It just makes it difficult. But usually, if I was just painting on a table with no cameras, no lights, no distractions, I would turn this around so I can get it on the roof nice and straight, and down the other side of the lighthouse nice and straight. Now all this will help to get you a more even sky on here. If your sky doesn't come out even, then make clouds in the sky. You know, just use any patches and have a cloudy sky. That doesn't matter. So now I need to tip this. Oh, I can see some big dry patches. I'm glad I tipped it. I haven't got water everywhere. And those dry patches will be very obvious once you get paint on. So I need to tip it. Sorry, I have to lift it up so I can see where those dry patches are. I think I've got them all. Right. So I'm going to use my cerulean. No, what did I make? Yes, I made a cerulean with a little bit of phthalo mix, quite watery. Big brush, big number 10 brush. Gonna test my mix. Looks quite nice and bright. And I'm gonna grab my Kleenex. And I just want to get some of that water off the edge so it doesn't run back into my sky. Okay, and then I'm going to see what this looks like. Okay, it looks okay. Having the background wet gives us more time to be careful as we put the sky on, because we've got to be really, really careful as we go around the lighthouse. And of course you can't see with the water as well, but you can see once you get the blue on your brush where the lighthouse is. Now, if I get little white cloudy bits, I'm just going to live with them. I get back to this side. There's little, hanging off the top of the lighthouse, there's little lights all around, so I'm just trying to avoid them. If I was doing a sky that just came down, it would be much easier, as I wouldn't have to go around all of these objects, so it would be easier to get a nice wash. Having these objects makes it a little bit more tricky. But also you have to remember the spirit of watercolor is it looks like a watercolor. You don't have to have it looking like an oil painting or a photograph. So I'm glad I've got this nice big round brush because it's putting down a good amount of paint quickly. And the beauty of this brush is it has a lovely, lovely point, so I can get it nice and straight down the side of the building. Nice and straight across the roof there. Now you can see I do have some areas that are not, the blue is patchy. And I don't want to fuss with that too much, because if I fuss with it too much, it's just going to get patchier. So I want to sharpen up that edge. And then I'm going to have to leave it. Whatever I get, I'll pull back a bit. Whatever I get, I get. And that's it. And if you really look at the photograph, there is sort of grey sky and cloud in it. And what I have now is I have the white contrasting with the blue sky. So do your best. I know this is going to be probably the most challenging part of the painting, is getting the sky in without it being too patchy. And mine's probably just a tiny bit too wet. I'm fiddling just the tiniest bit, Shouldn't really do that, but now there's lots of areas we're going to work on after this that we don't have to worry about drying the sky or anything. We can just leave the sky to settle in and dry by itself. I'm going to use that color, and I'm going to mix it with some raw sienna to make a light grey for the boathouse. The boathouse is a very sort of cerulean blue color, so I'm just going to tone it down just a little bit with some raw sienna so it's not exactly the same color as the sky. In the photo, the boathouse, the front of the boathouse anyway, is actually much bluer than the sky. So that's another choice you can make depending on how bright and saturated you want your painting to be. If you wanted the color of the boathouse to be more like bluish rather than gray, then, you know, make that choice. I decided to reverse everything. So in the photo, the sky was gray and the boathouse was kind of bluish. And I reversed it, made the sky blue and the boathouse sort of grayish. I'll show you what I mean. So in the photo, the sky is fairly gray blue, and then this boathouse is a stronger blue. On this side anyway, on the shaded side. So you can just change the mood of the painting with just a few changes like that to the saturation of your paint. I'm going to go to my 8 brush. The 10 was good for a big area like the sky, and I'm going to mix that grey. Now I'm not going to put paper towel over my sky, it's soaking wet, so I'll have to be very careful. I have that blue that I use for the sky. Now I'm going to add a little bit more cobalt for the boathouse, make it a little warmer. A bit of water because I want it light grey, and I'm going to add a little bit of raw sienna just to make it a slightly grey. It's desaturating the blue a little bit, making it a little bit more grey. And then I will zoom in on the boathouse. So on the boathouse, the front is bluer and the side is almost white. So let's get a dry brush look. I'm tapping this brush on my towel to get off some of the paint, and then I'm going to drag it down this boathouse because I want some bleached sort of white wood showing. And I'm going to do a little bit more texture later. I'm dragging that down. And across the top, the planks go the other direction. So I'm going to get a little bit more on my brush and drag it horizontally across those planks. And coming down the side, I'm going to go right over the window because it's going to be darker later. I'm going to darken up the front once this first layer's on. I've got that sort of grainy look. It's a little bit bluer than my first one. I'm going to get my smaller number 2 brush, and these parts here, see, I want to add a little bit more raw sienna because they're too close to the sky color there. And I'm going to do an edge to the roof as well. I'm going to bring those down a little less grainy. And I'm gonna leave this one going along there kind of white. It's very light on the side. Now this will all look much, much lighter once we get the dark roof in and all of that kind of stuff. And I will be doing a bit more here. Also across here is a painted part to the roof that's going to be going on. We're going to have shadows, we're going to have a bit of rust, all kinds of extra details. I'll pop that in. Now, like I said, today I'm going to have to go a little bit faster than usual so that we can at least get to the end of the painting, and then you can go back and you can work on rocks and things when we get to the end, or popping in the finishing details. A lot of the finishing details I'm going to do with pen because they're so tiny. Things like the black railings, I did those with pen. The black railings up here, I did those with pen. The weather vane, they're all so tiny. And you're welcome to try with a very small brush, but I just think things like that are just a little bit easier done with the black pen at the very end. And the little boat is a little white boat. I'm going to leave all the white parts white. If you do have the cobalt teal, I think Carrie bought some cobalt teal. That's sort of the color of the boat, the cobalt teal. If you don't have cobalt teal, use cerulean blue or use your most greenish blue. I'm just going to put in those little painted parts of the boat, which are the back here, the seats, and this is just my cobalt teal, which is sort of like a turquoise, rather a gentle turquoise. If you had a turquoise and you mixed it with white, you might get something very similar. The bottom of this is that blue color, and the woodwork. It's a very small little rowing boat. It doesn't need a lot of fuss. What I'm going to do on the back is I'm just going to lift a little bit of the blue just off there where the light's shining on it. And later I'll put a little bit of shadow on the back here. So that's sort of good. The inside of it's dark brown, so we can put that on later and just put that little bit of whatever you have, some turquoise, some cobalt teal, some cerulean blue, just a nice sort of turquoisey color for your boat. And then when you've got that done, we're going to work quite slowly on the rocks. You will need some salt for the rocks, and we're going to work back and forth with the grey and the colors for the lichen on the rocks, the sort of raw sienna, and the yellow. And we're also going to put in the yellow for all of the flowers, probably I don't think they're dandelions, but whatever they are, there's lots and lots and lots of yellow flowers. So we're going to put those in with nice bright yellow, Azo Yellow or Indian Yellow, or whatever bright yellow that you've got. So we've got those light yellows in first. So you catch up with the shed, the boat, and finishing your sky. So guess what? Guess what I'm going to mix for the dark rocks? You can probably guess. My old favorite, the old Ultramarine Blue and Burnt Sienna. One reason, they make a beautiful, beautiful grey, and they both granulate, so it gives a grainy look to the rocks if I want it. And they're colours you can wash off, so if I want to wash off lighter areas on the tops of the rocks, they will let me do that easily. So the rocks are quite grey, so I want quite a lot of blue with my mix, the Ultramarine Blue and the Burnt Sienna. If you're still painting, don't worry, I'll go over it again if you need me to. You need to catch up. So that's the nice dark grey for the rocks, the Ultramarine and Burnt Sienna. And then I want a lighter green. So I want the Cobalt Blue and the Raw Sienna, which is a sort of a greeny grey and not as dark. And you can also, if you find it's making it too green, you can add a little bit of burnt sienna to it as well. So that's the cobalt blue, and then I'm adding a bit of raw sienna. You can see as I add the raw sienna, it starts to grey up that cobalt. And you can see the two greys are quite different. And also the cobalt blue will be a little bit granulating. So I've got those two colors ready for the rocks. And then I want some raw sienna by itself for some of the lichen on the rocks. So this tray is going to be my rock tray. I've got my salt ready too. I'm going to rock one rock at a time. I'll get some raw sienna. Now for the flowers and the lichen, as well as the raw sienna, I'm going to have some Azo Yellow. And I can use this for the flowers or the lichen on the rocks. I have another yellow, Indian yellow, which is beautiful, beautiful color. Not the original, of course, that's not made anymore. It's was made by feeding cows mango leaves and mangoes and then collecting their urine, which made a very mango colored yellow, which isn't allowed anymore, thank goodness. They've managed to make one that's almost the same, just from chemicals. Oh, thank goodness for that. We've got all of those colors ready to work on the rocks. The other color I'll be using are the blues that I made for the shed and the sky as well, for the tops of the rocks, that they're multicolored. And these sort of white patches on the rocks, we can wash those out at the end. We can put a little bit of white on at the end. We can just use the salt to make those little patches. All of those techniques will be helpful to us. We can do a combination. Another technique is to use a very, very light pastel pencil on top of the rocks at the end too. That works beautifully as well. So if we use all of those techniques, we'll get lovely, lovely textured rocks. So I'm gonna sort of do every technique on this rock. Get my number 4 brush. And like I said, you may still be painting, but we have a lot to do. So I'm gonna have to go a little bit quicker and sort of push ahead. First thing I want to do is get some of the blue that I had for the shed and the sky. And I'm just gonna put that on the top. I'm working on dry paper, paper's dry. Put that on the top of the rock. I'm going to take a little bit of that raw sienna and I'm going to put that on as well. There's sort of quite a bit of lichen on this rock. Don't worry if it blends in with the blue, it'll make sort of a greeny color, which is absolutely fine. I might take a little bit of that Indian yellow for some of that, just a little bit. Then I'm going to take my dark gray. And I'm going to put that on the lower part of the rock. It doesn't matter if it goes over that yellow and raw sienna. Now, as it comes down to this other rock, some of the other rock can have a straight edge, but on the other side here, there's grass. So I'm going to bring that, the point of my brush, I'm going to bring that dark gray down to form the grass coming up. So in a spiky motion. And at the top of the rock here, I want I like a smoother transition. It's going to look too weird to have too much of the spiky stuff happening. So I'm going into my lighter gray. Put some of that lighter gray on, leaving some splodges. So some bits of the light blue showing. I'm going to get a little bit more of the raw sienna. And I'm going to just put that on wet in wet so it maybe bleeds back into the grey. Looks like a bit of a mess at the moment, but then I'm going to take my little bit of salt, tiny bit of salt, and before this dries up too much, I'm going to sprinkle that salt on there to get some texture in the rock and sort of blend all that together. Mop up that little. And it's a little bit too harsh there, so I'm going to take this brush, I'm just going to tap it on that there. A little bit more salt. You don't want too much salt. Put the rest in my garbage can. I only had a tiny bit on my hand. And then just let the salt do its thing. It will start making some texture in your rock. And if you feel that your rock's too dark when it's all dry, we'll go in with the scrubbing brush and we'll scrub some light areas off the rock once it's dry. So don't worry too much. I'm going to grab my one that I did before. So once it was dry, I did a little bit of scrubbing here to scrub a little bit of that out, and a little bit of darker grey here. And then what you don't want to do is you don't want to do the rock right next to it, because it's going to bleed into this one. So you want to leave the rock right next to it for later, and then pick one, possibly this one here, because you've got the barrier of the grass here, and you're going to have a dry rock here as a barrier. So you can put this one in next and then come back to this one after these two are dry. Now this one here is a lot more white patches on it. So I'm going to do this one a little bit lighter and maybe leave some light patches as I put the paint on. So I'm going in with the light grey. And as I'm painting it on, I'm going to leave some patches of rock unpainted. And remember, all the cracks in the rock, they can go on in the next layer. You don't have to have them all on in the first layer. It's good though to get some paint along the edge of the rock. If you don't get some paint along the edge of the rock, you're not going to have an edge. Down here, some flowers and different things. I'm just going into my darker mix as I come down the rock. I'm going to dilute it out a little bit. I don't want it too dark. This one doesn't have much lichen on, so I won't be putting that much on. It does have some grass coming up here, so I'm going to make that grass shape. And before that dries, I'm actually going to take it down a little bit further down here. Before that dries, I want to get my salt on, because if it dries before I get the salt on, I won't get any salt texture on there. So, and remember, it's just sprinkle just a little bit. We don't want a snowstorm. Just a little bit of salt on those rocks. And I'm making sure I brush the rest of the salt away so that I don't get that in my paint before I'm ready. Now sometimes, like this rock back here, which I'm not doing yet, it is a little bit browner than the other rock. So I might add just a tiny bit more burnt sienna to that grey to make this one just slightly warmer, slightly browner than the other two. This one here is much, much lighter. So I'm going to have a lot of light showing in that one so that they're different. Each one needs to be different. If you look at this one here, I put a little bit of blue here and then some water here to keep it light, then the grey and then the salt. So we've got different things happening on each rock. Grab my brush. So water for the light part. A little bit of blue for the light grey. And then we're going to go into the light grey. Take it over here. And there's a lot of grass along the side of this one. So again, you make the grass as you come down. A little bit. Grab a little bit of the darker grey for this side here. And you can always go darker later. Don't have to go dark all at once. And then what I want to do is get on the salt before it's too dry, because if it's too dry, your salt's going to do nothing at all. Now pop that on. I am managing to blob water all over the place. And you do want to make sure you get the salt off of the dry paper so it's not interfering with your other rocks or your paint. A little bit of salt on that one. The first one will look strange. As you get 2 or 3 rocks, more rocks, they will look more authentic. And at this point, it's a good time for us, once we've done a few rocks, to let them dry and then work on a lot of the yellow flowers. Because if we get too many rocks on and no yellow flowers, we're not going to have space for the yellow flowers. And I'm going to go between my Azo Yellow and my Indian Yellow, and maybe even some Gamboge Yellow to make the little flowers. So the ones right here by the boat, let's zoom in. I know you may not be ready for this yet, but I'll be doing them for a few minutes, so you don't have to rush. Let's move my painting. I'm going to go into my Indian Yellow with my 0 brush, and I'm just going to make a lot of little dots for the flowers. There's some very close to the boat here. It doesn't matter if the dots join up. Later you can unjoin them with some greenery, with some green put in. You can put more in later if you feel you don't have enough. There's a few just here and there. There's a big, there's big clusters of them. I'm going to just switch to the Azo Yellow sometimes. I'm just cleaning my brush, switching to the Azo Yellow. And there's some, there's some at the side of the boathouse. Just here, there's some grass and some weeds. I don't know if any of you are good at wildflowers. I don't think they're dandelions, but I don't know what they are, and I'm not very good at wildflowers, so somebody out there will know. I don't want to say what I think what they might be, because I know there's somebody who'll correct me. So I'm going to go between those two yellows there's a big clump here. A lot of the time I'm going to be using the Indian yellow because it's such a beautiful, bright sort of mango yellow. And those clumps in. There's some over here. If at any time they look a bit more golden, you can grab a little. I just grabbed a little bit of raw sienna. And I'm going to put a little bit of raw sienna in some of those ones a little further away. Down here. That raw sienna will blend with the grey, and it will be fine. Put a few down here. Now, as you look around the photo, there's quite a lot of yellow. Even on this rock up here, I'm going to put a bit more. And the yellow will look a bit isolated right now. It'll be fine once you get all the green in there. I'm looking for, gamboge. I'm going to have a little bit of gamboge in there too, that sort of orangey yellow. I'm just going to grab some of that. If you don't have gamboge, just mix a bit of red with your bright yellow. It'll give you pretty much the same effect. Because I want some of them to be a bit more orangey. That will look lovely against the grey. Mix a few oranges in with the other ones. And I'm going to mix some raw sienna with the orangey gamboge. And back here, there's some weeds or something back here. All of it gives a lovely break from the grey, a complement to the blues. I'm going to go into my Azo Yellow as well. The yellow back here. And the more you look, the more you find in these yellows and oranges and sort of raw siennas. Even the tips of the grass here are very yellow. Oh, and I've just seen some, let's see as I'm looking, I'm just seeing some sort of down here a bit. And I know it seems very isolated and a lot, but remember it's all going to be filled in with green and with grey and with different colours, so it will look so different once you get all of the other colours in, the greens and the greys and the background colours and the rocks. The green will be the last thing to go in once you've got all of the greys from the rocks, and there's grey on the slipway coming down from the shed here, and the sort of grey gravel on the path. So those need to go in first, and then we'll get the green on everything. So there's a little bit, most of this rock back here is green, but there's a little bit That's a sort of a warm grey, so I'm going to mix a little bit of burnt sienna with my light grey, and I'm just going to put that with my brush that's probably too big for that, but I'm going to put that little bit of warm grey back here, and it sort of comes into some green. I'm going to leave some grass shapes for that, and I kind of like the warm grey next to the cool grey of the shed. I maybe should switch to a much smaller brush. My 4. And then I want for over here a more sort of blue grey to come between the grass over here. The grass can come over the top. I'm just going to add a little bit more mottling to this rock here as it's drying up. And I'm just sort of dotting on the top here to add some mottling to this one. So now these ones are sort of isolated from these two, and the yellow that I put on dry, because I put it quite lightly onto dry paper. I'm going to work on this rock here, and if you look at the photograph, get it in the camera. This rock at the front is quite light here and then quite dark here, and it's got these light-like bits. Now you don't have to do all the light and dark at once. You can make the whole thing light to start with and then put the dark in on a second layer. I think that's much easier than trying to do the light and the dark at the same time. So at the top of the rock is fairly light. I can put the mottling in later, like I did just over here. And then there's all the mottling down here as well. So I'll get my number 6 brush, and the lighter grey, one that is the Cerulean, what was it? Is it Cerulean Blue? No, it's Cobalt Blue and Raw Sienna, sorry. Cobalt Blue and Raw Sienna grey. And then I'm going to do this side. I'm putting it on that wet area up the top here, but then I'm just letting it puddle, and then I'm sort of pulling a little bit off. And I don't want to do too much modeling at this stage. I can do that at the next stage. A little here and there. I will take a little bit of dark grey, and I can do a little bit of wet in wet with the dark grey. And I won't put salt on yet because I want to get the other half of that rock in. And we're still going with the light grey. I'm going to put the dark grey on later. And this is dry on this side so that I can leave a few dry spots, because there's quite a lot of sort of white spots on this one. And it's one of the closest rocks to us, so we can have a bit of much more detail. Now the salt will do a lot of the detail on the side for us, but there's one big patch of light that I want to leave And I've got to also go around those little yellow things. And I'm going to do a little bit of the dark wet in wet. And I want to do the salt before it dries up too much. Now just remember, this is not the final stage. This is the beginning stage. Get some salt on. Oops, sorry, bang the table. And then because these ones are drying up over here, I can go in and do this one here. And I'm going to add a little bit more, like I said, a little bit more burnt sienna to the grey, because I want it just slightly warmer grey for that rock. It's just a little bit different. And again, the top of the rock is quite light, so I'm going to wet the top of the rock. And then I'm going to come in with that warmer grey. Actually, what I also would like, grab a little bit of the raw sienna. A bit of a raw sienna edge here. I don't know if that will stay, but we'll see if we can make it stay. Back into my grey. And there's grass, so I want to have some grass between these two rocks. Now, any extra details coming down to the grass and so forth, I can put in when I got the grass in and I've got a few other things in. I can put a few extra dark details on the rocks. That will all be good. Right, well, I've got that one wet. I'm going to use my thirsty brush. That means it's clean. It's tapped on my towel, so it's not too wet. And I'm going to take a little bit of the colour off the top of the rock. And it's a little bit wet for the salt at the moment. I can see it's still a little bit shiny. So I'll give it a minute to lose its shine a little bit. A little bit more on that one. I'm just going to put a little bit on this one. It's quite smooth on one side, so I'm just going to put a little bit of salt on the right hand side of the rock. Chuck the rest in the bin. Now the first rock I did, I want to lift a little bit from that one. It's drying up. It's not perfectly dry yet, but I want to lift a little bit from the top. So I'm going to scrub with my little scrubbing brush. And because underneath is a little bit of that blue, a little bit from the side. So these colors, like I said, are very easy to scrub back, and with a little bit of scrubbing into the dry paint and a little bit of dotting with your Kleenex, a little bit at a time, scrub then dot, scrub then dot. You can get that nice mottled look into the rock. And when we do the side of the building, same thing, we can scrub out some of those light bricks in the side of the building. Anytime that we have an area of rock where we want more light, we can scrub some out. Best done on dry paint though. That way it doesn't distress your paper too much. I've got the grey right here. There's some areas of grey that are just plain, like down here. This area down here is just fairly plain. I'm just going to get my grey. I'm going to make sure I've got areas for flowers and grass. And just pop that in. It's just gravel. And we don't need to be too explicit about it. Just a bit of grey and some areas for the grass. Just pop that in. The slipway coming out of the boat shed is wood, but it's still dark grey. I want to have a couple more flowers here. Because I want to go grey under the boat too. But I kind of need a few more flowers close up right there. And I won't go grey till those flowers have dried. In the photo, there's definitely a very shaded side to the house that I did not make as dark, because photos tend to darken things. And then a lovely sunlit side to the house, which I added a little bit of yellow to make it even more sunlit. So when we mix the color, we're going to mix a sort of a darker color for the side, and then a bit of yellow and a bit of cadmium red, more sunlit for this side, and the top of the lighthouse just cadmium red. We will be putting a little bit of shading on one side. What attracted me to this photo was its simplicity. I know it's a bit complicated with the rocks, but there is a lovely simplicity to it, and I love the colors, the red and the white. And of course it's our lighthouse in Victoria, and I think a lot of us have probably been there at one time or another. It's a lovely place to visit, especially in the summer. So I've tried to keep this all Vancouver Island, and I love lighthouses. I really do. Now, I've given you 5 minutes, and I know I might be pushing ahead fast, but you can come back to the rocks and you can work on them later. They're all sort of a similar thing. You put extra detail in them, but we need to get, we can leave the rocks for a bit, and we need to get the house, the red on the house and the red on the top of the lighthouse at least put in. So for the side of the house, I think I can probably put that over for now. I'm going to use cadmium red. I've got to get hairs off my tray. So I'm going to use some cadmium red. And for the side, I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna to just darken it a little bit. I've got hair stuck on here. And a little bit of ultramarine blue. Not much. If you add too much, you're going to get a too dark a brown color. You can always add a little bit more shading later after it's dry. You don't want to lose that brightness. So I've got that color mixed, and I want to test it. It's a little bit too brown. I want to add a bit more red to that. I don't want it to be too brown. I can put shading on it later. I've got to just fiddle with it till it's just right. A little bit more ultramarine blue. I think that'll do. And let's zoom in again to the side of the house. Now, you're going to be painting very carefully because, hang on, I've got to grab my painting. We're going to go around these white railings with a small brush and this box on the side of the house with a small brush and paint these in carefully on dry paper. So once we get down here, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush and be a little bit more careful. Now the main part of it, I'm going to use my number 8 brush so that I can get the main part of the house in fairly quickly. The edge of the house here is white, so we need to make sure we leave that white. I need lots of paint so I can get this on fairly quickly with no streaks. I keep loading my brush so that I've got lots of paint on the brush and I don't have any streaks in the paint. Now when we get down here, I'm going to switch to my smaller brush in just a minute. Then I get along the top of the railing and around that little box that's on the side of the house. And then I'm going to switch to my smaller brush so I can get in number 2. Let's try my number 2 brush. I want to be able to get in these little spaces. There's a white railing coming down. There's a box here I have to go around. Have a look at your reference picture so you don't get lost. It's not easy to always just follow a line drawing. The black railings you can put on when this is all dry. You can use a black pen, put those on. If your rocks are wet, mine are a little bit wet, don't get your hand in them. I've got my hand in mine, but do be careful if they're wet. You don't want to be smudging them. I've got a small brush, so I've got to load it quite often so that I've got plenty of paint on it. Otherwise, if you don't have plenty of paint on, the colour just gets lighter and lighter as you run out of paint, and you don't get a nice deep colour. So we're just, if you find it too difficult to paint around the white railings, then you can go back afterwards and put them on with Dr. P.H. Martin's white, but it is going to be quite difficult to get the white over the red. You're probably going to end up with some pink happening. So if you can, it's best to try and paint around them carefully. Just leave the white paper. If you can't, then try later to put on the Dr. P.H. Martin's white. Now there's a sort of a chimney thing up here. Could be a siren, I don't know. But I'm going to paint that with the dark red. And there's a there's a hole right here. I'm going to paint with a much darker paint later. I could paint right over it with the red, but I'm just going to find it easier to find my lines, I think, if I leave it open. I'm painting it all very flat at the moment, and I'll put shading on later. Now what I can do is the top is lighter, so I'm going to use my thirsty brush, clean and dried, to just lift off a little bit of paint on the top and a little bit on the front. This is so much easier than trying to paint it light and dark as you're painting. It's nice, it gives you nice soft highlights and just makes it a bit easier. That's all I need to do, just a little bit of modelling on there. I'll come back and do the rest of the house when this side has dried a little bit, but there's of course the top of the lighthouse. I'm just going to do that with straight cadmium red. I'll put the shading on after the cadmium red is dry. We have a little bit of a point here and then a ball shape. And as it comes down, it's got a little bit of shaping. And then the top is actually sectioned into triangles. I haven't drawn all of that on here. Put that on with a pen later if you need to, or you can just leave it very basic. But the edges do form probably an octagonal, maybe a sextagonal shape. So the edges are straight with triangles going up. And I've just got nice bright cadmium red for this. And then of course we're going to go under that roof area with some dark when this is dry. And this red does not come all the way down. It stops just at the railing. It becomes white lighthouse. So, and on this side here is sort of a window. And we don't paint that in. So the railing comes around here, and you've got a slight curved line as the red stops where it becomes white, just here. That's just that little bit of red. Again, if you want a little bit of light, the light is on this side, on the right. You can take a little bit of the paint off once you put it on. Now on the right side, I'm just pulling a little bit of the paint off to give a highlight. It keeps the round look and the soft look. That's the top of your lighthouse. Oh, the other thing that there is around on the railings, I think, I'm not sure, but there are, I think they are probably lights but I'm not sure, but I think they are red lights that will light up at night that go around the bottom of the railing. Whatever they are, it's like red stitching around the bottom of the railing. And I'm going to put that on while I have my small brush and I've got red on my tray. And I'm going to get some very, very diluted red on my brush, because in the window here it's either a reflection of the red up here or it's a slightly reddish window. I'm not sure which, but I'm going to just copy what I see on the photograph, because I have no way of actually knowing exactly what that is. I'll pull back a little bit. And then I'm going to do the front of the house. So I'm going to use the Cadmium Red with a little bit of burnt sienna in it, just a little bit. And the other thing I want to do before I put the Cadmium Red on is get some Azo Yellow. And just here, quite wet because I want it to blend in quite quickly. And put a little bit of Azo Yellow. See what I mean? I want the red to come down into the yellow quite quickly to make it a little bit brighter. Just got too much water in my paint. I might have to do a second layer. And don't forget the railing and the shutters. I'm going to get my smaller brush. Quite a juggling operation here with brushes. And if you're not sure where the railings are, get your reference photo and have a look. There's a door here. And I've got to use my smaller brush on some of these things so I don't go too far over the shutters or anything else, or the windows with a curve. Now you don't have to worry about under the railings too much. You get this in first because that's all dry area. You don't have to worry when it's a dry area, but you do have to worry when you're working with wet paint that you don't let it dry as you're working, because then you'll get streaks. That's why I can't stop. And quite often if I do stop when I'm teaching because I want to talk, then I'll come back and my paint will be too dry. So I'm working quite swiftly. I'm going back and forth, little brush to get round the windows and so forth, and then bigger brush to get the bigger areas in before the paint dries up. There is the black streak coming down the side of the house is the drain pipe. So it can be a little bit confusing with your pencil lines. The actual side of the house comes out further than the drain pipe. And the windows, when you're drawing them, are much smaller than you think. It's very hard to actually draw them small enough because they are quite a lot to squeeze into a little space when you're drawing. So now I can worry about the edge of the door and the underneath of the railing here. And I have to check on my pictures to see where there's a white railing here. And then there's another one at the end of the shutter there. And then there's a big railing on the side of the staircase. So I have to really keep a watch on what I'm doing here. I think I may have even gone a bit too low. But nobody ever really notices those things. You don't have to worry about too many things like that. There is so much detail in a painting that quite often anybody looking at it doesn't notice the odd thing that you've missed out or done wrong. Just some very little bits of red to get in. Got my small brush. There we go. And it's still wet where I put the yellow in, and I'm just going to add a little bit more. As long as it's wet, you can add more paint, but you do have to be careful. Add a little bit more red. I just wanted that yellow to just brighten up that corner. I don't want it too yellow. It's just a color underneath that gives it a little bit of brightness. Now I'm looking at it now, and I know that when this is dry, I'm going to have to darken this end of the house. It's not dark enough at the moment. That's okay. I did 2 layers on my original. It's better to go light and put a dark layer on top than to go too dark or too brown or too blue in the first layer. So that's got most of our red on. I think that's all of our red, apart from I'll darken this up when it's dry. And that feels good when you've got quite a bit of the painting in there. We will do some modeling on the lighthouse to make it a little bit rounder, and we've got to do some modeling on the boathouse to put a couple more layers on. And we've got the bricks under the house here, and I can brush off a bit of my salt because it keeps getting in the way, keeps getting on my hand. I did put in my notes I have a colour called Cerulean Maroon. Show you what that looks like. Look at it, it's gorgeous. And I am going to use some of that to darken up with a bit of the Cadmium Red and some Ultramarine Blue to darken up the side of the house. The nice thing about the Cerulean Maroon is it is still very beautifully red, or maroon. So you don't lose that lovely intensity of colour. It doesn't sort of go brownish. Oops, I've gone right over that. I'm rushing. I'm rushing and I've gone over the side of my white. Don't rush. I should take my own advice. Slow down. Do a little bit of dark to the side of this. Small brush to model it in. And then I definitely need a smaller brush and a bit more patience to do inside of the railings. I'm not, like I was talking about the quilting earlier, I'm not patient enough to take time to do a lot of things. I want stuff done quick. Not always a good trait. So I'm having to put the shade in behind these railings too, so it matches the shade on the side of the house. And under these windows, there's quite a bit of shade. And I tell you, I'm going to add a bit of ultramarine blue to that color, because this door is open here and it is throwing quite a shadow. Just here. The other place there's a shadow. Always, if you want shadows, add a bit of ultramarine blue to your color, because the shadows are more blue. There is shadow along the edge of the roof. Use just a damp brush to soften the edge of that shadow. The shadow under all of the, like the window sills. Around the windows, the shadow. And of course, inside the door, what I can do is add even more ultramarine blue to that color. And a bit of burnt sienna. And I can go inside the door here. I added some ultramarine blue and some burnt sienna to the cadmium red color that I have. And I'm just going inside that door. This white door is open. I am not going to do inside the windows with this paintbrush. I think I'm going to do the inside of the windows with a pen. Shadow under this box. There's a lot more shadow than I'm going to bother to put in, because you can get too finicky in a painting. I'm going inside that little, either a chimney or a siren, I don't know which. You know, some lighthouses had sirens to call the crew when there was an emergency, so I don't know if that's what that is or whether that's a chimney. There's a little bit sort of like brick work on it. I think it's brick, yeah, on there. I'm putting that on. Now where I went over the edge there, don't know if that's dry. One thing I can do is try and wash it off. The other thing I can do is paint white in afterwards. I might think I'll do both. I think I'll try and straighten up that line with water. And of course it'll be a little bit pink. And then I will add some white later to just brighten it up and straighten it up a little bit. I used a hairdryer, so I know that all my red is dry. And I can at this point, because my red is dry, I can put a little bit of shade on this side of the top of the lighthouse. There's some quite nice shadows coming down. And it is dark underneath. I'll put that on when this is dry. So I've just popped those shadows on. If your side of the house is wet, we won't do the side of the lighthouse yet, but I'll tell you what we can do, even if the side of the house is wet, is with a small brush and the very light grey from the rocks. And I'm going to bring this over. I've got the light grey from the rocks here, and I'm going to add a little bit of that raw sienna to it, so it's a warm grey. And lots of water because I want it really, really light. I want to go inside this window and put the shadow on. It has to be quite a light grey. We're going to put a little bit more dark grey on when that is dry. And it has to be slightly warm, slightly raw sienna-ish. We're going to put a cooler one on when it's dry. And there's also one down here. I'm going to put that on. And again, when that's dry, we're going to put a little bit more shadow on. And I've gone over the edge again. Have to be so, so careful. Another place I want a little bit more shadow. Just a blue-grey. The end of the boat is just a little bit shaded. Put a little bit more on there, just to darken the end of the boat up. And I pulled right back so you can't see that. Just a bit more shading. I like the roof and the colour under the stone here, and the green, and oh, we've got lots to put in, so got to press ahead. I'm sorry. We just got to go for it. So I've got raw sienna, and I'm going to put that over a lot of the roof here, and then I'm going to take the light grey and put that over towards the right and just let it mix with that raw sienna, wet in wet. The roof's going to be quite dark, but this is the underneath of the roof, and then we'll put the dark on the top. I pop that on. And we're going to do exactly the same thing for the rocks on the base of the house here. We're going to put some raw sienna and some light grey on the underneath. And of course we're going to come over the top with dark paint. You can leave a little bit of white if you want, or you can put the white on later or wash it off. So underneath of the steps are grey. They're all going to be darker, but we'll put them in so we can help you find your way around the painting. And under the, here's grey. Going to be some greenery under there. And actually, I'm in a small brush, the base can go a little darker grey. The base of the lighthouse is grey too. I've got to be careful of the white railings. There's a little part at the base of the lighthouse that is grey. So tricky putting in the grey bits, because sometimes there's railing and sometimes there isn't. Really hard to see where. Yeah, there's a little triangle here. There's some railing and then a triangle of grey, going in the slightly darker grey now. There's a little bit here, but then there's a white railing. And then I think most of this part is grey. There we've got a little bit of the background, and okay, there's some sort of a rock or a wall here, and we won't worry about what it is. It's in the distance. It's going to make that dark grey too, because that's all it is some dark grey shapes along here, and they all go into the distance there. Now I'm going to, this is my dark grey here, and I'm going to make it dark brown for a moment because I want dark brown. It's the same mix. It's burnt sienna. I don't know which one's burnt sienna now. I think I'm in the wrong colour there. Who knows? Anyway, burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. I know why it didn't look like burnt sienna. I've got it mixed up. I've got some of my cadmium red on it, which was making it look a little orange. Okay, so I want to mix a dark brown. So it's still burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, but I'm not putting much blue in because I need some dark brown for some of the details, such as inside the boat. And again, the boat is a very small detail, so we don't need to do very much work on it. Small brush, and we just need to put the interior of the boat in. And just be careful not to paint over the seats. And again, if I want to vary the lightness and darkness of the brown, I just put it all on first and then suck some of it up afterwards if I want it slightly lighter. Get that all in. And there's just, it's just a little bit lighter on the sides. I'm just going to take a little bit off. That's good enough. It's just a small boat. You can either use a little bit of this color to do the planks on the boat, or you can use a pen later. That's up to you. Put some of that detail in like that, just quickly. The other place that there's a dark brown is across the top of the doors here. There's a plank of wood here, sort of sticks out at an angle. It comes across here. So I've got the dark brown. You can, I mean, you don't have to use ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. You can use a sepia, you could use a burnt umber. If your palette has some sort of a dark brown in, you just grab that. That's fine. I just always use that one. I just know that it works. It's, you know, it's my favorite, so that's my one I use, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm going to mix that with a little bit more ultramarine blue to make it a little bit more black. And I'm just going to put the details on the house. So very, very small brush. There's some sort of a little thing here. This one, shadow at the edge here. Along the edge here, here. The windows, quite dark grey, not much detail. That's the top of the roof. We're going to put some detail on the roof as well. There's planks. I'm going to get just burnt sienna now, quite watery. And there's a little bit of sort of rust coming down from these hinges. So I'm just dragging a kind of a dry brush down there for that. Getting a little bit of watery grey on my small brush to sort of form the planks and the doors. There's doors here. Of course there's hinges, but we'll put those in when this is dried up a little bit. There's that, can't really see under the doors there. Dark. Quite dark under the slipway. Oh, but a bit of shading. Like when it's all dry, I quite often come back with a bit more shading on everything. Grabbing either some blue or some grey. And the slipway, I'm going to put some raw sienna, some grey, and then I'm going to go darker with the next layer. Grab some grey. And we're going to have some green and some flowers in there. And under the boat it's quite dark. Pull back a little bit. And because the roof is so light still, it doesn't look it looks too light. So I've got some of that dark grey on my brush. Again, drying it off a little bit. I'm going to drag my brush down the roof because it's kind of water, I guess it's water stained, weather stained. So with my dry brush, I'm sort of dragging that dark grey down. And when that's dry, we're going to have to do some planks going in the opposite direction. A bit of shadow under the roof, just there. A bit of shadow coming down here. And then let's zoom in again, because we want to take, this should be dry by now, we want to take that dark grey and put in the brickwork that's under the building here. So I want to start behind this rock that I did. I want to make sure it's darker than the rock so that the rock stands out. And I can leave out a few of those bricks. I drew a few in so that I could find them. And I can always lift some out later. So again, look at your reference photo to sort of find any brick shapes that you want to leave or patches, and just remember you can wash them back later. That will work just as well. And again, this is the Ultramarine Blue and the Burnt Sienna. To make it good and dark at this end. I want quite a bit of Ultramarine Blue in it because it's quite grey, the brickwork. And fairly patchy in places. I know I'm going quite fast now. I knew this was going to take a long time. It's quite a detailed one. Sometimes I'm just going to have to leave you with a little bit of homework. So again, I'm bringing that one down so that I have the grass effect, just here coming down to the grass effect. this is like the edge of the wall here, and then it comes around the side to the steps. There's a bit of a box there somewhere. And again, it's a bit patchy. And down to the grass here. The side of the edge of the steps is smooth. It's either smooth concrete or wood. I don't know which, but it's smooth. So we'll just come up to the edge of that with this brickwork. Down to the grass work. Don't forget the flowers. And we can put that line under the steps there. Now it's also quite patchy along here, but you're not going to be able to see as much, so you're going to have to be very quick with that kind of patchiness along there, because you can't see as much of that. It's in the distance. Where you can see a lot of it is here. And the same on your rocks. You might want to put some more shaping, some more cracking, some more shadowing on your rocks now that they're dry. I'm just going to ease a little bit of that in with a damp brush. And sometimes you can use whatever the salt did, you can use that to help you, like to paint around whatever texture it made. I want a little bit more shadow here. And I'm going to use some of the salt pattern and just go around it. And my wet brush to soften the top. Wherever the rocks go down, like here, you need more shadow. And the way to do it is to sort of put it on, get a few cracks here and there, and then use a wet brush to just soften it in a little bit. But you'll make your rocks look three-dimensional if you have that shadow coming down in the base here, where it comes down to the grass or the other rock. And don't forget a few cracks in the rock. Give it some shape, some roundness. They're all of these rocks are pretty light that we've done, because that was just the first layer. So now you can go in with the dark grey tip of your brush and just work a little bit more three-dimension into them. And I'm going to have to leave you a lot of the rockery for homework to finish up later. Because there's a couple of things I want to do before we're completely finished. One thing is I want to shape the lighthouse. So I'm going to get some Cerulean Blue, very, 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 very watery Cerulean Blue. Very watery. And on the shaded side of the lighthouse, that's not watery enough, I've got to add more water. I'm going to add a little bit of Cerulean Blue. And then I'm going to soften it in with some water on my brush. Could have a little bit more colour, and it will be very similar to the sky colour. You want it just a little bit lighter. And I also want to put some shadows under this. That's Cerulean Blue. Shadows around here and under these shapes here. And I softened, it's very subtle, I softened the edge of that shadow with water. Now the other thing I did, be careful with this because you don't want to go overboard, and you don't have to do it if you don't feel confident with it. Now I'm getting my Azo Yellow and I'm watering it down to almost nothing, to almost just, let me zoom in so you can see the colour. It's almost water, and the sun is just hitting this side of the lighthouse, and I'm just taking that Azo Yellow, so watered down that side to give it a glow. Let me put it on a piece of paper so you can see. So this is how pale it is. It's watered down so that it's really, really pale. And you can soften the edge of that with water on your brush. And that just gives it a lovely, lovely glow against the blue sky. Let's pull back a little bit. It's really subtle. You can always put a little bit round here too if you want. Now there's other places where there is shadow that's just cerulean blue. There are the shutters have a little bit of blue shadow. It's really, really diluted, really diluted. A little bit on these shutters. The door is quite shaded, and we can put 2 layers of shadow on the door. But don't forget the railing that's in between here. Oh, I've gone over the railing. I'm going to have to do white over it. I went the wrong side. I went here where the railing was. So there is a little bit, the door is open and there's also shadow coming down at an angle here. There's a bit of extra shading. All these shutters have a little bit of cerulean blue shading on them. You can use a little bit of cerulean blue inside the windows of the lighthouse, just a little bit in here. A bit more shadow. This box on the side of the house is light grey with the white. The top is quite white because it's in the sun. We can put that on. Put a little bit more grey, on it. And then the final 2 things to do are the green and the pen. So let's look at the grassy area. And I'm sorry, I have to press ahead. I'm going to make 3 greens. Put this over here. I'm going to make my Azo Yellow with Sap Green. Like a yellowy green. And then just Sap Green. Somewhere, I don't have a tray left for it. Let's put it over here. Just some Sap Green. And then Sap Green with Ultramarine Blue to make a dark green. Now if you don't have Sap Green, mix blue and yellow. Ultramarine Blue, I have the Indian yellow here. And I'm going to mix Ultramarine Blue with it. And that makes a lovely green. Or you can mix Azo Yellow with Ultramarine Blue or Cadmium Yellow with Ultramarine Blue, and you'll get a lovely yellow. So all of those colours to make all the grassy areas. Small brush, like a number 2 or number 0 brush. And in a lot of these areas, the grass is very, very light. So I'm going in with that yellowy green to start with and flicking my brush upwards. Want me to zoom in a little bit more? There we go. So flicking my brush upwards, not going over the flowers, but sort of dotting in between them. And then I can take some of the dark green, and Wet n Wet, I can just add that at the base here, around the flowers maybe. Just to give a little bit of depth in here where the flowers are, and so that you've got nice light tops to the grass. And the other thing is the tops of the rocks. I'm doing a dry brush now. It's got a bit of green on it. I can drag that dry brush with a bit of green on it, or a bit of raw sienna on it. Let's get a bit of raw sienna on there. So it's fairly dry. Tapped off some of the paint, and I'm just going to drag that over that rock with a dry brush. And I want to get also some down here. There's a lot of greenery growing on the rock, and it's quite dark. So I'm going to get that greenery, drag it down the side of that rock, bring it up into some grass over here. It's a bit more in the shade. Tap off my brush, and then I want to get that darker green grass here, and then maybe some of the light grass next to it. So they just mix Wet n Wet. Make sure you go at the top of the rock. If you want it to have shape, you need to go around it with a nice straight line. And then in some places you can have like the grass all sort of growing higgledy-piggledy, and drag, you can drag your brush in the dark grey. I'm going to grab some dark grey on my brush. It's just my little brush, and I'm going to drag it over the rock here, so it has all that rough texture. And as it all starts to dry, you might want to come back with a bit more colour. And you're going to do that everywhere that there's some grass. So over here, I'm going to do the medium colour grass over here. Top of the rock nice and straight. Top of the grass a little bit more contoured. Rush. I'm really rushing now. So I lost the top of my rock there. I have to reshape it. So you see what I mean? You're going to go between, with all your different greens, you're going to go between the rocks, filling in the grass, some moss, lichen. You can drag a bit of green over it. Make some different coloured greens, so you've got different colours happening. And when these are dry, because there's some greenery that really stands out, you can come back when that's dry, and you can put the stronger green on when this is dry. And there's a sort of an area back here that's pretty indistinct. So you can have everything mixing Wet n Wet. I'd start with a bit of grey, and then go in with some green, and then some darker green, and then some lighter green, And just let all of that happen, all wet and wet back there. It's not that visible. Get a little bit of yellow as well. Sometimes you can do some yellow wet in wet, so I'm going to put some yellow in here. And then some green. So when it's in the distance and it's not that distinct, you can have all that wet in wet happening and just, it becomes what it is. It's just a mess of rock and weeds and wildflowers and stuff that you can't even distinguish in the photograph. So you can put it all in sort of wet and wet. And you might want to add a little bit more dark, especially when it's dry. There's all those sort of green details. There'll be some like over here too, between these flowers. And with my thin brush. At the front here, there's some like grass coming up. So anytime it's in the foreground, you can have a bit more detail. And so forth. So you get that idea. And then there's the small things like some planks coming down. Get some dark indigo or something, or some Payne's grey. Payne's grey will do it for me, and a bit of indigo maybe. There's some planks coming down here, down the slipway. And you might want to do this bit with your pen, but there are some hinges on the door here. There are some lines. There are some lines going along the roof, and I think probably the pen is good for this, but I'm just doing it with a brush at the moment. That gives you a bit of texture on the roof. And then there's lots of little things that we haven't addressed yet, such as this grey under the steps here, which is not stonework, it's slightly different. I used some Payne's grey there. Lots more texture on the rock, lots more happening on the rock. And let's pull back. And final details done with pen. Oh, there's the top of the roof. That has to be done with paint. Again, I'm going to use the Ultramarine and Burnt Sienna because the top of the roof is sort of a brownish colour, grey-brown. You can see the edge of the roof. Oh, I got wet paint now. I've got to be careful. And you can see a little bit of the roof along here. You can see a little bit of the roof tile. Just along here. I'll put a bit more ultramarine blue with that. You get a bit of shadow. Got my hand in wet paint. Get a bit of shadow under the roof. And I put that on, and then I'm going to wet that in with a wet brush. And most of the other detail, I would get a nice fine pen for things like the railings. The weather vane. Things like that. Oh, there's the edge of the roof here. You know, the detail on the lighthouse here. There's quite a few details that you can you can add with a nice fine pen if you have one. But of course, if you like to work in a brush, then you'd need a really, really fine brush. I would add details like the inside of these, and definitely where you need a very small brush or a pen is for the windows, because you've got to put these windows in here with the the window frames in between and so forth. So there's a little bit of detail on the shutters. You might even want to go around these sorts of details with a pen. It just helps pick out the edges. Even the door here, there is a hinge on the door there. Sorry, I lost my language for a moment. Trying to be careful with my pen. And it's much easier to get the shapes of all of these windows with a pen. They're quite small, tiny detail, and so forth. You get the idea. Let's pull right back. So I think there's probably another hour's work on this with a bit more shading, a bit of pen work. If you felt that the whole of the boathouse needed to be a little bit more blue, I kind of like the blue that's in the photo. You could go over the whole thing with a bit of blue when it's all dry, and just darken up the front of that boathouse, like the photo's a little bit darker, a little bit bluer. Things like that. If you find your shutters don't look blue enough, if they've dried a little bit too light, you could put a bit more shading on them if they look a little too light. And then there's quite a lot of railings around the house too that I haven't even put in with the pen. There's all the thin railings that go around here. So I'd put all of those in with a pen, and it's all dry. It's quite scratchy, isn't it? And down the side here too, there's railings down here. So sorry, there's a little bit of extra work to do on it before we're done, but hopefully you've managed to keep up. If you haven't, you can go back and watch the video and finish it another day. So.